A huge thank you to Jeff Holmes for bringing you today's video via Patreon. Othari against Urza Lord Protector, Zedru, and Yorn God of Winter. Well, we've got a means of ramping into our commander. I like the Anointed Procession, a bit of removal, some card draw. Pretty good hand, all things considered. The Urza player gets down Leyline of Anticipation. Alright, drawing into a Plains, so we can make that next turn. Get down at the tapped Sacred Peaks for now. A Frost Augur for Yorn. Zedru plays Jack-o'-lantern. And there's not much point in Urza playing anything on turn 2 because he's got flash speed on everything. Okay, we draw into a Sol Ring, so this could set us back a turn if it gets countered, but we'll try it here. Alright, and that does land, so we can drop the Boros Signet after that. Arkham's Astrolabe into play now, and then tapping down the Augur, and looking for some card advantage here. Grabbing a Snow-Covered Swamp. Zedru throwing down a Walking Atlas, and then it's Mana Crypt from the Azorius player, and likely seeing, I was going to say Azuri, but it is instead Shurikai, Genesis Engine. I think I've played against this player in this deck before. I think it's got turns in it, so yeah, we need to be wary of that. Then our opponent playing something during the main phase here. There's Urza, Lord Protector, so I think I might go for Swords to Plowshares onto that. Then using the generic mana that they have floating to go for the Shurikai, and that is draw 2 and discard. So I think in response to that, before they manage to get into any counter magic, we'll go for the Swords to Plowshares onto Urza, successfully exiling the Urza and discarding with the Shurikai the Might Stone and Weak Stone. So yeah, hopefully we'll see some graveyard exile at some point, but I don't think we have any in this deck. A Solemn Simulacrum is tempting, but I think I'd rather get down the commander and start swinging in here. So get into Othari, Sun's Glory, and then let's go for attacking in at the Urza player, because I'm worried about what he's doing over there, especially at instant speed. Get our first experience counter with Othari, and the one rebel we get can go in over here as well. Throwing the pilot token in the way of the 2/2 rebel. Nature's Law for Yorn, played out the Snow Forest, so we know he's still got the Snow Swamp in his hand. Grabs another forest and ramps further with the Cold Steel Heart. Glittering Stockpile from Zedru, and then activating the Walking Atlas, so going to make a 4th land by turn 3. And then the Jack-o'-lantern during the Azorius player's turn is being activated and exiles the Might Stone and Weak Stone from the bin. They did put that in the bin with this in play, so I'm assuming that they've got means of fishing things out of exile. White does have things like that. Chromatic Lantern from the Azorius player. Shurikai being activated again, and discarded with that a Flux Channeler. Continuing to play things at sorcery speed, it's a Jace's Archivist. They could have done both of these things during the end of Zedru's turn. Okay, there's an Esper Sentinel for us, so we can play a couple of spells here. Drop the Nykthos, and seeing as how everyone's mostly tapped out, I think it's fairly safe to go for the Anointed Procession here, even if everyone's going to be looking in our direction. Should maybe go for the Solemn, but I'm hoping we'll draw into a land off the Esper Sentinel. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, Anointed Procession is just going to take us from everyone looking at us to everyone definitely looking at us, so I think the wise move is Solemn here. Yeah, if we drop Anointed Procession and Esper Sentinel, as well as the fast mana and our commander and everything, I think everyone's just really going to worry about us. Just got a bunch of white stuff in hand, so I'll grab a Plains, drop the Esper Sentinel. And this does make it so that we can play both the Elin and the Anointed Procession next turn if we want to. So we'll swing in over at the Urza player again with both of our creatures, and the 2 rebel tokens we get are going to swing in over there as well. Throwing a pilot token in the way, I imagine the Jace's Archivist is going to want to sit back. We might draw some cards from that. So got our opponent down to 29 and 6 points of commander at the moment. Hoping the other 2 players will leave us alone if they see that we're targeting one player. Yorn God of Winter into play, so the Sultai player not looking to wipe the board anytime soon, seemingly. Frost Augur being activated again, and revealing a dual land. The Walking Atlas going to get another land into play. Okay, that's a Phyrexian Rebirth from our opponent. I think that's a really strange board wipe. Yeah, that's quite a strange board wipe, I think, because we've shown that we're not attacking our opponent. All it's really doing is helping out this Urza player who has a lot of mana, and it's hurting the Snow player as well. Yeah, Not too sure about that. Didn't draw a card with the Esper Sentinel. We don't have any rebels in play now, so we will put our commander back in the command zone and likely replay it next turn. Solemn Simulacrum draws us a card. That is a 10/10 Phyrexian Horror token. And we see a Sundown Pass, so we're definitely making a land next turn. Shurikai being activated. Then Karn's Scion of Urza. They discarded a Tezzeret's Gambit. And that Karn received a counterspell from the Sultai player, so that opens us up to likely getting down our commander next turn, unless this player has something going for an Enlightened Tutor. So definitely has plenty of things that he's going for here. I think I'm justified in worrying about this player. Show you the chat actually, because I don't want to call it drama, but for lack of a better term, I suppose it's a bit of drama. I said that was a strange board wipe in the chat, because I think it was. And yeah, the Azorius Urza player over there got very defensive about it for some reason. Tutored on top of the library, an Ensnaring Bridge. Yep, I'm hoping that my opponents are starting to put 2 and 2 together here. Okay, and we draw into Grand Crescendo, which could come in handy, so Sundown Pass, straight into recasting our commander. And obviously we've kept our experience counters here, so Athari is going to be able to swing in, and it will make us 3 rebel tokens, assuming that it doesn't get removed. We're up against a couple of white players, so it's likely that we'll see exile at some point. Continue to swing in over at Urza, as I'm probably going to do until he gets knocked out. And the pilot being thrown in the way of a rebel again, so that is 7 damage to our opponent, taking them up to 9 commander. Okay, and then they pull back the pilot. So down to 17 and 9 commander. The Snow player throwing down an Icebind Pillar, so that can tap down our commander, which I hope it doesn't do. Boreal Outrider after that, this is a really good one. Gateway Plaza into play for Zedru, so we'll have to put a mana into that. Then we see Zedru the Great-Hearted for the first time this game. And then the 10/10 swinging in towards me. I would expect that because we're at 49. I'd obviously like it if it went towards Urza here because I'm worried about it, but makes sense to swing in at me while I'm wide open. Mana Crypt becomes more and more treacherous as the game progresses here. We'll see if Urza gets lightning bolted. Yep, going down to 14 with it. Gilded Lotus from Urza. And our opponent will have to play a couple of spells here if he wants the Athari not to untap, but instead going for the Supreme Verdict, so we definitely go Grand Crescendo here and give all of our stuff indestructible. Obviously not going to make any tokens there, but it's not the main reason it's in the deck. Our opponent wiped out that big 10/10 though at least, which we'll be able to chump block with the Rebel, but it's a good thing to have it out of play. So if our opponent had got down the Ensnaring Bridge and another card from their hand, it wouldn't have allowed the Athari to untap, but obviously we don't know what's in their hand. Might have been that they couldn't have done that. Activating the Shurikai again, and discarding to that a Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. We're seeing lots and lots of powerful cards here. Alright, so if we just turn sideways here, we've got enough on our opponent. We've got 15 on him if he blocks. Now this assumes that no one else is going to interfere, which I'm hoping they're not going to. I'd like to get down the Anointed Procession, but that might have this thing be activated, which would be stupid, but I don't put it past my opponents to do that. So let's go for the attacks. This player is holding up priority, and yep, there we go. The Athari getting tapped down. So basically leaving a player in the game for some reason. Well, I've made my opinion clear in the chat and upset someone for it, so I'll just not share my opinion on the internet. I do try and encourage opponents to make what I deem are the correct decisions, but yeah, sometimes they'll not do that and get upset instead, so let's go over to the Urza player again. Sometimes players are just trying to be nice, I think, and trying to keep players in the game just for the sake of being nice, but it's not necessarily the intelligent way to play. Right, so we might as well get Summoning Sickness away from the Elin. I'm not sure how we're going to make tokens, but we will get this down regardless. Might be that we can get some kind of protection onto our commander. Noteworthy that they didn't block with the pilot again, so at 8 with 4 cards in hand. And then we'll get down the Sacred Foundry, tapped, and just holding up the Karn's Bastion really. Explosive Vegetation for the Snow player. Zedru into play again. And only 3 lands tapped into Zedru there. Did they have this in play previously? Might have sacrificed this with the stash counters on it. Either way, their commander is back in play. Right, so, as far as I'm concerned, Urza should be out of the game by now, so we'll see how much damage you can do with this turn. The Ensnaring Bridge becomes more relevant. Might actually keep our commander tapped down. No one else seems to be looking to get rid of him. Mana Crypt does bolt him though, so going down to 5. Alright, so not only are they making strange decisions, but they're actually actively trying to help each other, which is, well, that's one way to play the game, I suppose. I suppose it takes all sorts to make a world, and yeah, we've got some different philosophies of playing here, and I'll hammer its archive for the Urza. There we see the Ensnaring Bridge, so I'm sure they'll be able to cast one more spell, well, maybe not with only 2 mana. Okay, there is a Cyclonic Rift going on to the Elin. So trying to keep us from going wide on him next turn, I imagine, which we would have done. I would have attacked him with that. So he's at the mercy of his Mana Crypt, really, for, well, indefinitely. So keeping our Athari tapped down with the Ensnaring Bridge, I'll be very intrigued to see if this taps down one of our Rebel tokens. We only have to connect with one of our Rebels, though, and we can go wide on the Pilot token, so knocking them down to 3 and a Lightning Bolt from Mana Crypt should do it on that opponent. Although it's noteworthy that he's got this, and this can gain twice as much life, so I'm guessing he might have some life gain in the deck. Anyway, we might as well proliferate with the Khan's Bastion. Okay, so it doesn't really... the client doesn't really... yeah, I did get 4, that's good. It doesn't really show you that you've selected yourself for proliferation, which is not good. But yeah, we do get our 4th proliferation counter, and we draw into a mountain. Oh, I was just looking at Athari untapping there. It's that it can't attack, it's not that it doesn't untap. Alright, so anyway, the Rebels can attack. So we'll go through to the attack phase and see if anyone interferes this time. Yeah, something is getting tapped down here. Okay, it's the Athari. They don't realise that. Yeah, they're clearly not paying attention. The Ensnaring Bridge is in place, so we can't attack him with it. Maybe best to play it safe. Can't be held back as a blocker this way, and we might have removal for that thing, although they could have tapped it down in response. So we'll continue to go in at the Urza player, throwing a Pilot token in the way of the Rebel. Take our opponent down to 1 with that. And I think it's wise to get down the Elin again, simply because it's a creature that we can swing in with. Not really worried if we are the enemy at the table at this point, because everyone's focused on us anyway. Not going to make use of the Anointed Procession at any point soon, so yeah, just continuing to hold up the Khan's Bastion, I think. If we can't get experience counters from our commander, then we'll certainly get them from the proliferation. Yorn, God of Winter, back into play again. And then a Blizzard Spectre. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player returns a permanent they control to hand, and that player discards a card. You can only choose one of those. Elixir of Immortality for the Jeskai player. And then they decided to give the... oh my god. The Elixir, yeah, I didn't think of that. The Elixir of Immortality over to the Urza player. I don't actually know what the... I mean, does this game just go on forever because it's... we're just helping players to not die? Alright, our opponent didn't go for the Elixir of Immortality there for some reason, but managed to dodge the Mana Crypt anyway. So now, cracking the Elixir of Immortality, and going to go up to 11. Now seeing the deck of many things, so they could draw 4 cards with that if they're lucky, or they could return a card at random from graveyard to hand. They don't have a graveyard anymore thanks to shuffling. And then an Encroaching Mycosynth, no land permanents you control or artifacts in addition to their other types. Nothing good ever came of that thing. So we will proliferate with the Khan's Bastion again. And yeah, so if we hover over ourselves here, it's just all white. And then I click on myself and it just stays all white. So I'm not going to click it again. Yeah, see, there was no change to the UI there to tell me that I'd actually clicked it, that I could tell anyway. It should go green or something. Anyway, our opponent's down to 1 card in hand, so we can't attack him with anything. Likely just dropping the Anointed Procession and passing through the turn. The game's been totally warped by my opponents at this point. Okay, there's a Call the Coppercoats, which isn't all that good against my opponents who aren't very creature-based. Play out the Anointed Procession and hold up Call the Coppercoats. We've got 3 and 2, so we could point it at all 3 opponents if we wanted to. Might be worth just going Khan's Bastion again, if we can ever actually ever attack in again anytime this game. Again, our opponent is tapping down the Athari. I still don't think he knows that this Ensnaring Bridge is in play, or what it does. But, like I said last time, he could just be making sure that we don't have a lifelink blocker. Now Zendikar Resurgent hits play for the Snow player, and they only have one card in hand over there. So now we're just playing into Zedru's hand so if Zedru can get some non-land permanents into play, we're just playing into his hand here, where he can start palming them all off onto everyone and getting more card advantage than us. The Council of 4 into play for Zedru. Mana Crypt damages Urza. Now a Shark Typhoon from the Urza player. Anyway, at the end of the turn, we will go for Call the Coppercoats. And we'll target 2 players, so this is going to be 5 mana. And doing this simply because Elling can draw us cards here, and hopefully we can deal some damage to the Urza player over here. Okay, so we get 8 tokens, tap down the Elling. We'll look at 8 cards and put one of them into our hand. It's noteworthy that this player can still be saved because of the Icebind Pillar. Let's see here. Blade Historian. Attacking creatures have double strike, so that'll probably get our opponent. Could go for Waves of Aggression and have an additional combat. That can untap our commander. But I imagine they've learnt with this thing by now that it can't attack. Yeah, let's just go for the Blade Historian here. The Divine Visitation is tempting as well, but we need to get into some means of making tokens for that, so I'll try the Blade Historian here. This is really good for our devotion with the Nykthos as well. See what we draw into during the main phase, or during the draw step even. That is a Purphoros, God of the Forge. So we could just buff our creatures with that, couldn't we? Yeah, I think it's okay to get down the Blade Historian. Maybe just get both down here. So it's Purphoros, God of the Forge first of all. And we'll see if our opponent has any counter magic. Keeps holding up priority on us. Suppose there's an argument to be made for us going Blade Historian first. I was thinking we play this in second so that we get the shock on our opponent. But if we'd gone for this first, we would have had more devotion for this, and then could have maybe held up the Khan's Bastion. Anyway, won't bother working it out now. Our opponent going to make a Night token, because this is the second spell that we've cast. So that shocks everyone with the Purphoros. And then we can attack in here and hope that we get rid of this player. Could have a creature to throw in the way with the pilot. I think we're best just going wide on this player. I'd like to spread the damage around, but yeah, with interference from our opponents and this player maybe having something in hand, I think it's best just going in all out at this player with the tokens. So thinking about the Ensnaring Bridge this time, the Icebind Pillar is going to tap down a token, but we should have more than enough damage on our opponent at this point. Alright, so let's say he gets rid of a couple of tokens somehow. Yeah, let's get that in there as well. And then these two can go in at the Snow player. And we'll tap down the Nykthos and we'll buff our creatures with the Purphoros a couple of times. This is obviously overkill on this player, but I think it's long overdue, so I just want to try and make sure that we do get this through. So in response, seeing what you can get with the Shurikai. Also has an activation on this as well. Discarding a Plains to that. Making a pilot token, of course. If you can play out a non-creature spell, which he can do at instant speed with the Leyline, it will make shark tokens as well, so activates the Deck of Many Things with 4 cards in hand, and rolls a 17, so that is 13, and goes up to 8 cards in hand. Then we make it through to the blocking phase, so I'm hoping that we've got this player finally. They block with this thing on the Blizzard Spectre, so I don't think that they're realising that we can buff with Purphoros, which is fine with me to get rid of that. A pilot obviously goes in the way as well. So we will go for Devotion equal to red. We had 7 white mana, but it's only 6 red mana. Can still activate this twice. So that's +2 to the power of our creatures, meaning we are attacking him with a bunch of 3/1 double strikers. And then Zedru handing over the Night token to this player. Yeah, I mean the blockers have been declared now anyway, so that's too late. Alright, Jesus, finally able to get rid of that player. And the Snow player goes down to 32. We'll actually be able to start attacking him with our creatures next turn, hopefully. 2 cards in hand for the Snow player, but he does have double mana, and if he plays creatures into this, does draw cards as well. And there we see a creature, that's a Rime Feather Owl. And Council of the 4 drew our opponent another card there because Drew his second card during the turn. Obviously draws during the main phase and then drew to the Resurgent. And this thing is a 15-15 in the air, so yeah, need to look at going wide on this player pretty quickly because we're not going to be able to swing in with Athari, I imagine. Ugh, and then it's a Blood in the Snow. Not sure, did they play this and just top deck into the Blood in the Snow? Yeah, that feels bad anyway. It's exactly what our opponent needed. He'll be able to reanimate something here as well. Surprised he didn't attack him with the Yawn first though, could have had his lands untapped there. Reanimating the Frost Augur. What we can really hope for is that our opponent taps out and forgets about holding up mana for the Icebind Pillar. Grim Draugr into play. Drawing another card with the Zendikar Resurgence. Playing out a Mouth of Ronan as well, so that can go after our commander. Not quite yet though, because they don't have the mana for it, but yeah, holding up the mana for the Icebind Pillar, unfortunately. And then Mind Unbound. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a lore counter on this and draw a card for each lore counter on it. Okay, it's just an Odric for us. I think we have to start forcing our opponent to deal with the Othri again. Although, if we go for Odric this turn and proliferate with the Khan's Bastion, we could swing in with Odric next turn and threaten to swing in with Athari, which obviously they'll tap down, but yeah, we can start swinging in with Odric at least. That assumes our opponent doesn't make any more blockers, of course. So Purphoros going to trigger and shock our opponents. And then there's no point bluffing because we're empty-handed, so Khan's Bastion going to proliferate again. And we'll put a counter on ourselves. Well, our opponent's in top deck mode now at least, but does have the Yawn to cast, so that will be a cantrip at least. Could blow up our Odric with the Mouth of Ronan as well. Just top decked into the north. Seeing the other side of the commander now, that is Kaldring the Rime Staff. And they do have some creatures they can go for with that. So Zedru casts an Urtai's Scorn, which is just counter a spell. Frost Augur looking at the top card of the library for some more card advantage, but not revealing anything with that. Okay, not throwing out the Yawn again for some reason. So the first card is drawn from Mindbound. Okay, and Zedru just passing through the turn as well, with 4 cards in hand. Okay, there's a Demolition Field, so I think Demolition Field and blow this thing up is okay. So in response could blow up the Odric here, but we're forcing him to use it at least. Instead just deciding to float the mana seemingly. And we'll grab a mountain with our Demolition Field. Our opponent obviously gets into another snow. Yeah, just cast our commander. So they can obviously still tap down the Athari, will shock our opponents at least. But yeah, likely going to get through with the Odric here as well, I think. Athari gets tapped down by the artifact. Swinging at the snow player with Odric. Kaldring being attempted to come back into play again. And then Rimefeather Owl coming back into play off the back of the Kaldring Rime Staff. And they'll draw a card there, of course. The Rimefeather Owl comes into play tapped. That is a 20/20 with flying at the moment. And the Frost Augur just went for an activation, revealing a Marit Lage's Slumber, so throwing that into play. But before Marit Lage's Slumber can come in, there is a Syncopate that our opponent can't afford here, thankfully. So no 20/20 Marit Lage yet, but it's only a matter of time. Or not, he goes into exile off that counter spell, so not going to see Marit Lage's Slumber. The Scrying Sheets got activated there, 2 cards in our opponent's hand. And obviously holding up mana for this thing. I'd love nothing more than to get into some means of protection for this thing, or removal for that. I mean, I'll settle for either. The card draw to get into these things would be nice as well. We've seen a Pilfering Hawk revealed off the top as well, apparently. Zedru back into play again, does not have the mana held up for the ability though. 5 cards in hand, gonna draw 3 to this next turn. Alright, and what was I just saying? Vanish into Eternity, so not only can we remove it, we can exile it. So Icebind Pillar, its days are numbered here. This is a card that I haven't seen anyone talking about from the new set as well. Exile any non-land permanent at instant speed for 3 mana, but it does cost 3 extra to cast if it's a creature, so I just run this assuming that I'm not going to target a creature with it, although in a situation like this we absolutely could. In response, the Pillar taps down our commander, that's fair enough, but yeah, they're going to be struggling against our Athari soon, I imagine. And then we're empty-handed again, so might as well proliferate. And then we will swing in towards our opponent here. Odric obviously going in towards the snow player here, and we will buff it if our opponent doesn't block. Buff it with the Purphoros. Alright, so dealing 4 damage to our opponent, we do have the 1919 to outrace, unfortunately, which, yeah, if we make 16 tokens next turn, could proliferate before we swing in as well, so that'll be 18 tokens. That should be enough with the Purphoros to get rid of that player. It all depends on what they draw into by playing their spells here, because they'll be able to play a couple of creatures. Now a Frostwalk Bastion. So activating the staff onto the Boreal Outrider. Casting Boreal Outrider draws them a card to the enchantment. Looking at the top card with the Frost Augur, but not revealing a card thankfully. Then it is Pilfering Hawk for another card draw. Will come in with a plus counter as well. Then Sculptor of Winter. Then Boreal Druid. And Marite of the Frost. Spirit of the Aldergard. The bear is a 26-5, so we just pray that our opponent doesn't get into any haste at this point. Noteworthy that the Marite came in as a copy of Zendikar Resurgent. So we'll draw 2 cards per creature that enters now. More card draw in Guardian Project. They had to filter for the green mana there, so they've only got 1 blue mana and all black at this point. Or actually it'll be triple blue thanks to the enchantments, won't it? Now Grim Augur, getting +1 and Menace. Don't think our opponent can get us here. Yeah, can get us for 36, as I see it now. Floated a bunch of mana. Yeah, can nearly get us. Might be that this player can deal a bit more damage to us and knock us out of the game, which would be pretty fitting for this game, because it has been a 3-on-1 for the most part. Oh, I must have worked it out wrong there. Dealing 35 to us. This is a 9-2 with Menace. And we've got a 26-26 in the air. And they do both swing in at us. So we go down to 4, no Mana Crypt in play thankfully. Just have to hope Zedruu doesn't do anything to us. Our opponent doesn't draw anything to the Zedruu, but will draw 3 cards to the Mind Unbound, so going up to 8, and then the draw phase is 9. See a Demolition Field from Zedruu as well, so that could go onto our Karn. I'm not sure if that'll be relevant. Karn's Bastion's done a hell of a lot of work for us this game, while we haven't been able to swing in with Athari. A Rust Elemental. So our opponent could give this to us in an attempt to get rid of us. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it. If you can't, you lose 4 life, which will be exactly enough. Then a Jinxed Idol. At the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 2 damage to you. Although I don't think they've got the mana to activate Zedruu now, because they've just played 2 colourless spells and didn't leave up the 3 colours that they needed to activate it, strangely. Okay, so there is a Legerdemain. Exchange control of an artifact or creature and another permanent that shares one with it, so going to steal away the Rime Feather Owl and give this over to our opponent. So Zedruu continuing to do Zedruu things. Should be giving the Rust thing to us. Okay, so we just need to pray that our opponent doesn't have a Swords or something like that to deal with the Athari. I'm not going to tap down the Karn's Bastion until the Athari trigger is on the stack. But luckily we do get to swing in here, so I'll swing in towards the Zedruu player. Kind of a sick joke that we drew into the Skull Clamp there, but we don't have a means of sacrificing our 2/2s anyway. So now we proliferate on the stack. Click on there, takes us up to 8. And then our commander will take us up to 9. And we'll make twice as many, thanks to, amazingly, the Anointed Procession has stayed in all this time, after all that time of me holding off on it. So we get 18 of these, and they can all just swing in over here. It doesn't really matter, because Purphoros is going to finish our opponents off. So there we see all the Purphoros triggers go on the stack, and this should be enough to finish off our opponents alone. Alright, and so ends that game. Yeah, ended way later than it should have done, I think. The Skull Clamp... Well, the Skull Clamp couldn't have taken us into anything anyway, but next turn we were getting into Gold Knight Commander, so yeah, basically being held back for most part by the Icebind Pillar, because we couldn't get into any protection against it, so thankfully got into the removal eventually, but could just as easily have gone the way of the Snow player. They were only a turn away from getting us there. Hopefully you all enjoyed this visit to Athari. As tortuous as it was for me, I'm sure it's going to be a more fun game to watch once all the dead air and swearing in the next room I've been doing has been cut out. If you did enjoy it, then be sure to leave it a thumbs up and consider donating on Patreon via the link in the description below. I'm Tribal Kai. Thank you for watching.